The sun was barely peeking over the horizon as the town of Maplewood slowly woke from its slumber. The leaves rustled gently outside a modest house on Sycamore Lane, where something special was always waiting. The sound of a tail thumping against the wooden floor and the quick patter of paws on tiles. That was Rusty, the golden retriever with a heart as big as his fluffy tail. Every morning, without fail, he'd sit by Liam's bedroom door, waiting. Liam was only 10, but in Rusty's eyes, he was everything. Friend, brother, packmate. They'd been inseparable since the day Helen, Liam's mother, brought the tiny golden fluff ball home from the shelter 2 years ago. Rusty had been found abandoned in a box on a rainy night. Scared, cold, unwanted. But when Liam knelt down, held out his small hand, and whispered, "You're safe now," Rusty's entire world changed. From that moment, Rusty became Liam's shadow. He waited outside the bathroom door, slept curled up by Liam's bed, followed him to the kitchen, and every weekday morning when the yellow school bus groaned to a stop at the corner of Willow Street and Sycamore, Rusty sat by Liam's side, tail wagging, ears perked, watching his boy climb aboard. The bus driver, Mr. Jones, always gave Rusty a little wave. "Taking care of him, are you, Rusty?" He'd chuckle, and Rusty would bark once as if saying, "Of course." Their routine was like a well-choreographed dance. Liam would crouch down, wrap his arms around Rusty's neck and whisper, "Be good. I'll be back soon." And Rusty would lick his cheek, tail wagging fast enough to create a breeze. But one Friday in early spring, the rhythm broke. It had rained the night before, and the street still glistened with puddles when Liam and Rusty walked to the bus stop. Rusty's paws splashed softly on the pavement as he trotted beside Liam, leash hanging loosely in the boy's small hand. They talked about dinosaurs, or rather Liam did, while Rusty listened with the serious attention only dogs give. The bus pulled up, and Liam knelt to hug Rusty tighter than usual. "Love you, Rusty. I'll tell you all about the museum when I get home, okay?" Mr. Jones waved. "Big day today, huh, champ?" "Yeah," Liam beamed, and then he was gone. The bus pulled away. Rusty sat for a moment longer, head tilted, watching it disappear. Then he turned and trotted home, just like always. But that day, Liam didn't come back. It happened so fast. A truck, a sudden swerve, a scream. Helen got the call at noon. She dropped the coffee mug in her hands. It shattered like her world. And in the silence that followed, Rusty lifted his head from the living room rug, ears twitching. Something had changed. He could feel it. By evening, the house felt like a tomb. No laughter, no footsteps running down the hall, just sobs. Rusty paced between the front door and Liam's room. He nudged open the door with his nose. The bed was unmade, a sock on the floor, a toy dinosaur lying sideways on the desk. Rusty climbed onto the bed and curled into the blanket, inhaling the fading scent of his boy. The next morning, as Helen sat numb on the couch, Rusty waited at the door, leash in mouth. She didn't move. Confused, Rusty whined. He paced, he pawed the door. When Helen finally opened it hours later to take out the trash, Rusty bolted, straight to the bus stop. He waited. The bus came and went. Rusty stayed. He sat in the same spot, eyes watching the street like a soldier on duty. The wind tugged at his fur, but he didn't budge. Mr. Jones saw him and frowned. "Where's your boy, Rusty?" Rusty tilted his head. "Guess he's not feeling well, huh?" Rusty didn't move. Hours later, a neighbor gently coaxed Rusty home with a biscuit, but the next day, Rusty returned, and the next, and the next. Helen tried everything. Closed the door, hid the leash, called his name. But every morning, as if guided by something unseen, Rusty would find his way to the corner of Willow and Sycamore. He didn't bark, didn't whine, just sat, waiting, watching. People started noticing. Some smiled, some teared up. And Mr. Jones, the old bus driver, began carrying treats in his pocket. Still waiting, huh, boy? Rusty would nuzzle the treat, tail giving a gentle wag, but his eyes never left the road. Helen watched from the window one morning, hand clutched to her chest. "He still thinks you're coming home, baby," she whispered. She'd tried grief, counseling, tried cleaning Liam's room only to collapse halfway through folding a t-shirt. But nothing compared to seeing Rusty sit there each day, loyal, hopeful, heartbreaking. One evening, as Rusty returned from the bus stop and placed his tired head on Helen's lap, she finally broke. "How do you do it?" she whispered through tears. "How do you keep going when he's gone?" Rusty looked up, eyes wet with unshed emotion. And in that moment, Helen realized Rusty wasn't just waiting, he was holding on. For Liam, for the routine, for the love that refused to die even when a heartbeat had stopped. The days grew longer and spring slowly slipped into summer. But for Rusty, time didn't change anything. Every morning, just before the clock struck 7, he would slip out of the slightly cracked front door, the one Helen had stopped locking. She knew where he was going. She no longer tried to stop him. Rusty would walk the short distance down Sycamore Lane, past Mrs. Donnelly's picket fence, past the bakery with the bell above the door, and down to the corner where the big maple tree cast a long shadow across the sidewalk. He'd sit right at the edge of the curb, exactly where Liam used to stand with his backpack slung over one shoulder. His golden fur would catch the morning light, glowing softly like he was kissed by the very boy he missed. Some days it rained, some days it blistered with heat. But Rusty always came. He never whined, never barked, just sat, watched, and waited. The school bus would pull up with a hiss and creak, and Mr. Jones would lean his head out the window. He'd smile sadly, eyes full of quiet understanding. "Morning, Rusty," he'd say. "Still no sign of your boy, huh?" Rusty's ears would perk slightly at the sound of the bus engine, his tail giving a hopeful wag. But when no sneakers touched the ground and no familiar scent filled the air, he'd lower his head and rested on his paws. It was Mr. Jones who started the quiet ritual. A small milk bone every morning, laid gently at Rusty's side. Sometimes a pat on the head. Sometimes a quiet, "He was a good kid, I miss him too." Back at home, Helen moved through the house like a shadow. She didn't vacuum Liam's room, she couldn't. His dinosaur slippers still sat beside the bed. His drawings, mostly of Rusty in capes or spacesuits, still clung to the fridge, with magnets shaped like tiny bones. She tried once to fold his clothes into boxes, but stopped halfway through the first shirt, clutching it to her chest as she crumpled to the floor. She kept Rusty's collar hanging on the hallway hook beside, Liam's little blue raincoat, the coat he wore the first time he ever took Rusty to the park. There was a tiny smear of dried mud on one sleeve, and Helen couldn't bring herself to wash it. She used to call Rusty in when it rained, but he wouldn't come. He'd just sit there, soaked to the bone, staring down the street. That's when she stopped trying. She realized Rusty was holding on to something she herself was terrified to face. The aching space between what was and what could never be again. The neighbors noticed. One by one, they began to stop when they saw Rusty at the corner. Little Emma, a shy girl with thick glasses, started bringing him bits of sandwich from her lunchbox. "Hi, Rusty," she'd whisper, gently setting the bread near his paws. "I know you're waiting, but I thought maybe you'd like some ham." Rusty sniffed the sandwich, gave it a gentle lick, but his eyes always stayed locked on the road. Old Mr. Bennett from 2 blocks over started coming by with a folding chair and a newspaper. "You and me, Rusty," he'd say, unfolding his chair beside the dog. "Two old souls waiting on something that may never come." And still, every morning the same scene played out. Rusty waiting, watching, believing. One Sunday afternoon, Helen opened Liam's closet and pulled out something she hadn't touched in months, his school backpack. It was worn at the straps and had a small tear near the bottom seam. Inside was a half-finished math worksheet, a plastic dinosaur toy, and a pack of crumpled tissues. At the very bottom, she found a crayon drawing, a stick figure boy holding hands with a golden dog under a rainbow. "Me plus Rusty forever," it read in Liam's careful handwriting. Helen sank to the floor, pressing the drawing to her chest. Her sobs filled the quiet room, and Rusty, hearing her grief, patted over. He pushed the door open gently and sat beside her, his head resting in her lap. Helen stroked his fur with trembling fingers. "You still see him, don't you?" she whispered. "Every time the bus comes, you think maybe he's coming back." Rusty looked up at her, his eyes wet and glistening. There was no need for words. His heart spoke in silence. That night, for the first time in weeks, Helen took a small step forward. She placed the drawing into a picture frame and set it on the living room table, beside a photo of Liam and Rusty, both of them grinning wildly at the beach, wind in their hair and fur. The next morning, Helen stood by the window, holding a cup of coffee, watching as Rusty made his slow walk down to the corner again. But this time she followed. When Rusty reached the spot, he sat down just like always. But then his ears twitched. He heard the soft crunch of her shoes on the gravel behind him. Helen stood still, unsure what to say. She hadn't been down here since the accident. Rusty looked back, eyes full of something deep, like he was inviting her to remember, not to hurt. She sat down beside him on the curb. For a long time they didn't speak, didn't move. The wind rustled the maple tree leaves overhead. The birds chirped, then came the low hiss of the bus brakes. Mr. Jones pulled up as always. He blinked in surprise when he saw Helen there. "Well, I'll be," he said softly. "Morning, ma'am." "Morning," Helen managed. Rusty stood, tail wagging slightly as the door opened. He took one step forward, ears forward, nose twitching, hoping, but when no one stepped out, he slowly sat back down, eyes dimming once again. Helen reached over and scratched behind his ears. "He's not coming, Rusty," she whispered, her voice trembling. "He's gone, baby. He's gone." But Rusty didn't move, because in his heart, and maybe in hers too, Liam wasn't truly gone. He was still in every breeze that tousled Rusty's fur, still in every morning walk to the corner, still in the warmth of memories that hadn't faded, even if the world had moved on. And so they sat together, a grieving mother and a loyal dog, united by the love of a boy who had given them both a reason to keep breathing, not to move on, but to move forward together. The summer sun faded, slowly giving way to the crisp chill of fall. Leaves scattered across the streets in shades of orange and gold, and the wind whispered through the neighborhood like a ghost, soft, sorrowful, and unrelenting. But even as the seasons changed, one thing remained constant: Rusty's morning ritual. Every day without fail, he still trotted down Sycamore Lane, his gait slower now, his eyes still filled with aching hope. He would reach the corner and sit, beneath the old maple, its roots spreading like memory itself. And every time the school bus groaned to a stop, he'd rise to attention, tail wagging slightly, ears perked. But the door never opened for Liam, and still, Rusty waited. Helen watched from the window most days, her coffee cooling untouched in her hand. There were moments she wanted to rush out and pull him back, to shield him from the pain he wouldn't release. But then she'd remember the way Liam used to look at Rusty like he was the other half of his heart. And so, Helen let Rusty wait, because that love still lived in him. One morning, a letter arrived. Not by post, but slid beneath the door, the handwriting messy as if scrawled by a child just learning to shape his letters. Helen picked it up cautiously. On the front it read, "For Liam's mom and Rusty." Her heart caught. Slowly she unfolded the single sheet inside. "Dear Rusty, I see you every morning at the bus stop. My name's Zach, and I'm in the 3rd grade. I think you miss Liam a lot. I asked my mom what happened, and she said he's in heaven. I don't know much about heaven, but I bet Liam is still playing with you in his dreams. I bring you crackers sometimes, but I leave them behind the tree so I don't scare you. You're the bravest dog I've ever seen. I told my class about you, and my teacher cried. I hope you know we all love you. Your friend, Zach." Helen pressed the letter to her chest, tears slipping down her cheeks. For a long moment, she stood there in the foyer, the paper trembling in her hands. Rusty wandered back from his morning watch just then, his steps heavy but determined. He saw the letter and sat beside her, pressing his head against her thigh gently, like he knew. "People remember you, baby," Helen whispered, crouching down and holding his face in her hands. "You're making sure Liam's love doesn't disappear. You're still teaching people how to care." That same afternoon, Helen took a step she hadn't been ready for. She opened Liam's memory box. It was a dusty blue container with faded dinosaur stickers still stuck to the corners. Inside were pieces of a life too short, too sweet. Drawings, birthday cards, a tiny sock puppet, and a collection of Polaroids, mostly featuring Rusty in the silliest poses imaginable. In one, Liam had placed a pair of sunglasses on Rusty and labeled it, "Coolest pup alive." In another, Rusty was asleep on Liam's chest, the boy's arms wrapped tightly around him, their chests rising and falling in perfect rhythm. Helen's tears soaked the corners of each photo as she carefully laid them out on the dining table. Every snapshot was a whisper from the past, a quiet echo of laughter once so loud it had filled every crevice of the house. But then she found something she hadn't remembered placing there, a folded piece of paper addressed to Future Rusty. Her hands trembled as she opened it. "Dear Rusty, if you're reading this, I might not be around. Mom says writing letters to the future is like sending hugs through time. So here's a hug. You're my best friend. You're the bravest, smartest, funniest dog in the whole world. Thank you for licking my face when I cried and for barking at the thunder when I was scared. If I'm gone, I want you to know something. You gave me the happiest days of my life. Even when my legs hurt and I had to miss school, you were there. You always made me feel better. Please don't stop waiting. I think love never really goes away. Maybe you'll feel me when the wind blows or when the sun touches your fur just right. I'll be with you. Forever, Liam." Helen collapsed into the chair, clutching the letter to her heart. Rusty whined and came to her side, nuzzling into her lap as if trying to take the weight of her grief into his own body. She hugged him tightly, sobbing into his fur. "He loved you more than anything in this world," she cried. "And you never stopped loving him back." The next day, Helen decided something needed to change. Not to erase the pain, but to honor it. She found an old wooden bench at the back of the garage, dusted it off, and painted it a soft sky blue, Liam's favorite color. On the backrest, she stenciled Liam's name and Rusty's paw print, tracing it gently from one she had taken in clay years ago. The bench was placed at the bus stop, right beneath the maple tree. Rusty walked over, sniffed it gently, and without hesitation curled up beside it, resting his chin on the seat as the wind rustled his fur. A plaque on the side read, "In loving memory of Liam and Rusty, a boy and his dog, forever waiting together." Passers-by stopped and stared, many of them silently placing a hand over their hearts. Emma from the neighborhood came by with a bundle of wildflowers and placed them at the base of the bench. Mr. Bennett saluted as he walked by. Even the bus driver, Mr. Jones, got out of the vehicle one morning, knelt beside Rusty and whispered, "You did good, buddy. You kept him alive in all of us." And still, Rusty came every morning, not just to wait, but to remember. His waiting became more than grief. It became a symbol of love that didn't end with death, of loyalty deeper than time, of the kind of devotion the world desperately needed to see. Children whispered stories about him at school. Artists painted him. A local newspaper featured his story under the headline, "The Dog Who Waited, a Town's Heartbeat of Hope." Helen received letters from strangers. They thanked her for letting Rusty keep loving Liam, for reminding them that sometimes the purest souls walk on four legs. That night, Helen stood by the door as Rusty returned home under a sky blanketed in stars. He looked tired, older than before, but peaceful in a way that touched her deeply. She knelt and kissed his head. "Thank you. she whispered. "For keeping his spirit alive. For being everything good in this world." Rusty leaned into her chest, his eyes drifting shut as the crickets sang softly in the darkness. He still waited. But now, he wasn't waiting alone. The sun broke through the clouds that morning, its golden light spilling across Sycamore Lane like a soft blessing. It was one of those rare mornings when everything felt suspended, quiet, weightless, like the world was holding its breath. Rusty stirred slowly from his spot near the fireplace. He no longer rose with the excited energy of younger days, but with the slow, deliberate motion of a soul that carried the weight of years and memories. His joints ached more. His once vibrant golden fur was now kissed with silver. But his eyes still held the same unwavering purpose. Helen was already up, standing in the kitchen with a mug of tea cradled between her palms. She watched as Rusty limped to the door like he always did. He didn't bark or whine. He never had to. She understood. She opened the door gently. "Go on, baby," she whispered, her voice soft and trembling. "I'll be right behind you." The old dog stepped into the morning light, the breeze tousling his fur like a warm hand. He moved slowly, his steps smaller now, as if the path had grown longer over the years. But there was peace in his stride, the kind of peace that only comes when one knows their purpose is nearing its completion. As he reached the maple tree, the wind picked up just slightly, swirling the fallen leaves around his paws. He paused for a moment and looked up at the sky. Not for the bus, not for the sound of children's laughter, but for something no one else could see. He lay down beside the blue bench, their bench, the one Helen had built in honor of Liam. Rusty rested his head gently against the cool wood and closed his eyes. Helen approached moments later, carrying a small blanket and a photo of Liam. She laid them both beside Rusty, then sat down on the high bench, her fingers trembling as they brushed through his fur. "You've waited so long," she said softly, her voice cracking under the weight of all the unspoken grief. "Every day, through rain and snow, through seasons and silence, you never stopped." Rusty didn't move, but he sighed, that deep, almost human exhale of a heart that had loved too much and asked for nothing in return. Helen held the photograph in her hands. It was Liam's favorite, the one where he and Rusty had fallen asleep under the Christmas tree, tangled in lights and laughter. She looked from the photo to Rusty, and her tears fell freely now. Do you see him?" she whispered. "Is that why you're peaceful this morning?" And somewhere in the silence, Helen felt it. She couldn't explain how, but she felt Liam, not just in memory or imagination, but something deeper, like his presence had returned, just for a moment to sit on that bench with them. Rusty's eyes fluttered open briefly, and Helen saw the glimmer, that spark of recognition. And then, his gaze lifted, not toward her, but slightly above, as though he was watching someone only he could see. Helen turned her face to the sky. The clouds had parted, and the sunlight now formed a beam that stretched directly to the maple, a tree. Birds chirped softly in the distance, but otherwise the world had gone still. It was as if the universe itself was honoring this moment. As the day wore on, neighbors began to gather. Word had spread, Rusty wasn't moving. Zach, the young boy who had once written him a letter, arrived with his mother. He carried a single red rose and knelt beside Rusty, pressing the flower into the earth. "You waited long enough, buddy," he whispered. "You can go play now." Emma from across the street brought Rusty's favorite treat, a piece of banana muffin Liam used to sneak him, and placed it by his paws. She didn't say anything. She just sat beside him and cried. Even the bus driver stopped. Mr. Jones stepped off his usual route, walked over slowly, and removed his cap as he stood over Rusty. "No passenger ever waited more faithfully than you," he murmured, voice thick with emotion. Helen sat through it all, her hand never leaving Rusty's fur. She whispered stories to him, memories of Liam, of snowball fights and bedtime giggles, of muddy paws on clean floors, of first words and last goodbyes. You were his world, she said, kissing the top of his head, and you became mine. As the sun began to dip behind the trees, Helen felt Rusty's breathing slow. The rhythm that had always been so steady began to fade. She laid beside him now, wrapping the blanket around both their bodies. The photograph rested against her chest. You can go now, she whispered, voice barely audible. He's waiting for you. Rusty's chest rose once more, then stilled. No sound, no struggle. Just a soft release, like a candle flickering out, leaving warmth long after the flame had gone. Helen didn't cry at first. She just lay there, her hand pressed against his still side, listening to the silence he left behind. The kind of silence that filled every crack in your soul. And then, as if timed with the moment his spirit left, a single leaf drifted down from the maple above, landing gently on Rusty's back. Helen reached up and held it to her heart. All around her, the community stood in quiet reverence. No words, no prayers, just presence. Because sometimes, grief didn't need to be spoken. It just needed to be shared. That evening, Helen sat on the porch alone, Rusty's collar held tightly in her hands. The sunset painted the sky in colors too beautiful to describe, like the heavens themselves were celebrating a reunion. She whispered a promise into the wind. Take care of each other. And somewhere in that fading twilight she imagined it. A field bathed in light. A boy running barefoot through the grass. Laughter echoing into eternity. And Rusty, bounding toward him, faster than he'd moved. In years, finally whole again. They met in the middle, a boy, his dog, and the wait was over. The next morning the bus arrived like it always did, right on time. But the air around the stop felt different, like the sky had lowered its voice and the earth was mourning in stillness. Mr. Jones, the bus driver, slowed the vehicle and came to a full stop, even though no child stood waiting. The bench sat empty, except for a small photograph, a red rose and a dog collar that gently clinked in the breeze. The maple leaves rustled above, whispering their farewell. From inside the bus, the children pressed their faces against the windows. Many of them had grown up watching Rusty wait at that spot, rain, shine, or snow. His devotion etched into the rhythm of their mornings. Today, some of them were old enough to understand why the bench sat empty. Others simply felt a pang in their hearts without knowing why. Mr. Jones stepped off the bus for a moment and bowed his head, tipping his cap once more. Goodbye, Rusty, he said softly. You were a better soul than most of us could ever dream to be. Back at Helen's home, silence clung to the walls like a heavy fog. She stood in the living room holding Rusty's favorite toy, a ragged, squeaky dinosaur Liam had given him on his 3rd birthday. It hadn't squeaked in years, but Helen couldn't bring herself to throw it away. She knelt beside the fireplace where Rusty had spent so many winter evenings curled up, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed the grief to come freely. Tears soaked her blouse, her hands trembled, and her shoulders heaved with years of pent-up sorrow. Not just for Rusty, but for Liam. For the laughter that no longer echoed in the hallways. For the backpack that still hung by the door. For the empty seat at the dinner table. And now for the quiet left behind by the one creature who had managed to keep Liam's spirit alive. Faithfully, patiently, day after day. Now you're both gone, she whispered into the quiet. That evening, Helen made her way to the bus stop. She carried a small wooden box cradled gently in her arms. Inside was Rusty's collar, a tuft of his fur, and the letter Liam had written the night before he passed. She hadn't been able to read it until now. She sat on the bench, the one she'd had painted blue because Liam had once told her, "It's the color of Rusty's eyes when the sun hits them." Carefully, she opened the letter. Dear Mommy, if I don't wake up tomorrow, please don't be sad. I'm not afraid. I just want you to know that I love you so much. You're the best mommy in the world, and Rusty, please don't leave him alone. He's not just a dog, he's my best friend. He understands me even when I don't talk. He sleeps next to me when I'm scared. He makes me feel safe. If you ever feel lonely, just sit with Rusty. He knows how to love better than anyone. And if I can't come back, maybe he'll wait for me, so when I do come back in the sky, I won't be alone. Love, Liam. Helen pressed the letter to her chest as tears fell freely again. The sky above the lane had turned amber, the sunset stretching into a gentle glow that wrapped around her shoulders like a warm blanket. She looked beside her, half expecting Rusty to be there, ears perked, eyes scanning every passing child, waiting. Always waiting, but the bench was still. And yet, she didn't feel alone. Over the following weeks, something unexpected began to happen. The bus stop, once just a place of waiting, became something more. Children began bringing drawings of Rusty and Liam, colorful crayon portraits of the golden retriever with his tongue out and tail wagging. Someone placed a small statue of a dog beside the bench. Another painted paw prints along the sidewalk in chalk. Emma, now 10, came by every day after school to sit at the bench and talk, not because she expected a dog to return, but because the spirit of love lingered. Zach, who had once written Rusty a letter, asked his parents if he could adopt a dog. "I want to love one like Rusty loved Liam," he said. Helen watched it all unfold from her porch. Rusty's devotion had ignited something bigger, something eternal. A few months later, on Liam's birthday, Helen decided to do something special. She called the local parks department and asked for permission to officially name the little space near the bus stop. On a cool spring morning, surrounded by neighbors, children, and even a few dogs, a small plaque was unveiled. Liam and Rusty's bench, a place of loyalty, love, and forever waiting. The community clapped. Some cried, others simply stood in silence, moved beyond words. Helen spoke gently to the small crowd, her voice steady, but emotional. Liam left this world too soon, and Rusty stayed behind to wait. He didn't understand death, but he understood love, and that was enough. This bench is not just for them. It's for all of us, to remember that love, real love, waits and never gives up. That night, Helen sat alone on the porch. The stars twinkled above. The air was cool, and the scent of lilacs drifted from the yard. She closed her eyes, and in that quiet stillness she felt it again. A presence. Not like a ghost, not something scary or unreal, but the warmth of a boy and his dog. A soft bark in the wind, a giggle in the rustling leaves. She imagined Liam walking through a field, barefoot, grinning. Rusty bounding toward him, no limp in his step, no ache in his bones. Just joy, eternal, boundless joy. They met, they embraced, and they ran. Together. Whole. Again, Helen whispered to the wind, a smile playing through her tears. "Wait for me too." And somewhere beyond the stars, a boy and his dog promised they would.